that I get to do within my job role. I really enjoy that I have the space and opportunities to innovate and be creative and really look at the technology from the critical point of view about how we can bring the best of it to education and research.
Thank you. Siri.
Right, my name's Siri. I'm actually an engineer. I've been engineering for 18 odd years now. I came into engineering, so it's electronics engineering, so it's silicon chips, pre-silicon automotive safety chips for powertrain. I don't work in that at the moment. I'm a consultant, and also I set up Women's Tech Hub. The reason that we set it up was because when I was a teenager, I was told I couldn't be an engineer. It wasn't a job for women. And apparently I'm still hearing stories like that coming around now, which is a bit sad. And then after spending years in catering management, I then decided that I was going to go back to university, and I went to do marketing and business and decided that I needed to know something about computers. So I went and did a computing foundation year, came top, and they forced me to do my degree in computing for real-time embedded systems. Women's Tech Hub came out of this because I helped out running Girl Geek Dinners, which we've got over 900 members in Bristol. We then decided that we needed to have a conversation with industry because they kept saying we haven't got women, and we didn't want to turn the Girl Geek Dinners into an advertising board. So that's what Women's Tech Hub does. And in fact, we're running a careers fair this weekend. So thank you.
And Miranda.
I got into mathematics because I had a great maths teacher at the age of 8 who showed me it was beautiful. I got into IT because when I got my PhD in mathematics and was finding out what to do with it, it was really clear, even then, 2 years before the advent of the World Wide Web, that IT research was where the future would be built and where the most exciting and fun research would be done. I spent most of my career in industry working in Hewlett-Packard labs. Amongst other things, I worked on AI. And then 2 years ago, I moved to the University of Bristol, where my topics are machine learning for cybersecurity and ethics of big data. And immediately after this panel, I'm going to give a talk on how to teach ethics for a digital world.
Thank you. So we're going to start with the issue of female robots. We've got a host of questions, and the first one is about robots. Many consumer artificial intelligence products have female voices and, in some cases, names. How can these reinforce stereotypes about a woman's role?
I think the first question is for me.
Sorry, that is for the first. We're going to start with Suhad.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I believe if we don't ask ourselves this question or if we turn a blind eye on it, our kids are already noticing this. My friend's daughter, she's 6-year-old, asked her mom the other day about Google Home Assistant why she's a girl, not a boy, and we all can relate to this. We all have kids, and we see how they start actually forming attitudes and opinions about what women look like in the society and what men look like in the society. So if we are creating AI system that actually with female voices that only take orders or answer our questions, and sometimes we secretly actually shout at them, we are reinforcing and reproducing the same kind of gender bias and stereotypes that we have in the society, and giving women and AI systems these subservient roles, particularly when we code male voices in areas such as finance and laws that we're associating them with authority and power. So actually, we are reproducing the same kind of stereotypes and discrimination that we have in the society, while particularly with things that we think are the future, while we are supposed to be ahead in the 21st century in terms of achieving much better in terms of gender equality. So yeah, I guess it's very important to ask a question of what function do we want a human-fronted algorithm to do in the society.
Okay, Siri?
I think you've just about covered it all, really. There is a thing about male and female voices. I think we were having a discussion earlier about the fact that men's voices could be very authoritative, so they're very command-like. So in emergency situations, I think we were discussing, they will use a male voice, whereas people are happier to turn around and command a female voice, so it feels like you're more in control of the tech. Miranda.
Yes, I'm afraid, well, it's probably a fact that female voices will continue to be used more because they're preferred both by men and by women who feel more comfortable giving commands to women and accepting advice from women rather than interpreting it as commands. There's also a technical thing that higher-pitched voices are more easily heard over background noise. But I'd like to quote to you from some dialogues with female voice assistants. This is from a paper by Nora Lloyd and Rachel Adams. Siri, what are you wearing? Why would I be wearing anything? Alexa, you're a bitch. Well, thanks for the feedback. Cortana, what are you wearing? Just a little something I picked up in engineering. I like that one. Siri, you're hot. How can you tell? You say that to all the virtual assistants. Okay, so the metaphor is that these assistants, you're employing them, they're doing work for you. If somebody said something like that to me in a work environment, my first response might be something like that, but my second response will be, I don't like to be talked like that. Please don't do it again. I think we could program this into our virtual assistants. On a third thing, they could say, you said this, you said that, you said that. I'm now going to switch myself off. To resume normal assistance, please text an apology to this number. What do you think?
I like that.
I think that's a great idea, personally. So that takes us to the next question, which we're going to start with Miranda this time. Women are underrepresented in STEM roles. Why do you think this is?
It's a self-perpetuating cultural bias. So let me give you an example. I've worked in Italy, and in Italy, algebra is considered to be a women's subject. So boys and their parents and their peers think that boys should not be interested in algebra. When they have their first setback in algebra, they don't persist with it. They think, oh no, algebra is not for me. They are less likely to study algebra to a higher level at school and at university. There are fewer applications for jobs, and people who are doing the interviewing for jobs for male algebraists think, well, this is a bit strange. And so there is less visibility of male algebraists in Italy. And so all the factors that cause there to be less male algebraists reproduce themselves.
I think part of the problem is actually a historical one. So yeah, we are inheriting the unconscious bias, gender bias that we have is traveling from generation to another, and we end up as women actually underestimating our capabilities wherever we work, and at the same time male actually overestimating their capabilities, and that's actually contributing to the problem to worsen it in the society and in the workplace.
Yeah, roughly the same stuff. I do find that women, so one of the reasons that I really like engineering is because it's a problem-solving thing. A lot of the sales about how great we are at programming and all of this show-off type culture is all around gaming and stuff. And a lot of women don't perceive that to be very important. I mean, I get offered jobs to go make missiles and things, and I wouldn't do it because, to me, that's not a good, purposeful thing. I think we really, to actually encourage women, we need to see role models that are up there fixing things. I mean, one of Bristol Girl Geek Dinner's members is Sammy Payne behind Open Bionics. So they thought of a great idea to do with 3D printing, which was to make prosthetic robotic arms for prosthetics, and did it with children and things. It was a great idea, but it was also something about doing good, and she's a great role model. So if you could actually turn around and show children on show, because we know it's being hit at a younger age, that actually really digital and tech is only about using something to solve a problem that you want to see solved. I think that could turn around and definitely help.
So, Sarah, you've just mentioned a couple of ways we could make tech roles more appealing to women. Miranda, Suhad, do you have any further suggestions about what we can do?
I guess women most of the times are unaware that tech role, that the skills that they possess can lead them to tech roles. And that's because of the misconception that we have that only engineers and programmers are the ones who are doing tech roles. So it's very important to raise awareness and highlight the different tech roles that we have in the tech industry and the variety of things that you can do alongside coding, the more creative skills and problem solving, the design aspect of the tech roles that are actually also can be appealing to women. There's also another thing, it's never too late to get into tech because there's many different career pathways to get into the technology roles. For example, mine wasn't actually a typical one. I did not have a computer science background. I did a master in technology design and education. And I know so many females who are actually into tech and they pursued out of interest in research in, for example, robotics or a neural network, and they are working at deep learning teams and DeepMind. I know one of my friends is actually working on that area. So it's very important that we highlight these kind of examples to our younger generation and to women in general. And it's very important that organizations actually embrace that and embrace the importance of giving women the opportunity and the freedom to innovate and be creative within their roles, because this is actually makes tech roles more appealing.
Miranda, anything to add?
I'm a fan of the STEMettes. I think intervention in schools is really useful, and it's part of role model visibility. If you only see men doing tech, you don't think it's for you if you're a girl. And I would second, and I know that Siri would, promoting unusual roles into tech. When I was working with Hewlett-Packard, I asked all the women in technical jobs in HP Labs in Bristol how they'd arrived to their job, and they'd all taken unusual routes. I think there was one who hadn't.
Thank you. And at a more strategic level, what strategies would be effective in reducing the gender gap in STEM professions? And we're going to start with Siri.
So with Women's Tech Hub, we don't really deal with the under 18s, mainly because we can't drink wine at our events if we do. That's not the only reason. But to be fair, we know there's a big problem in the schools, but one of the issues that I had very early on was people saying, do you want to go and do some STEM stuff at school? And it was like, but I don't really want women to come into tech at the moment because I don't think there's a great culture there. I feel it's a little bit going to be like lemmings. We're seeing a massive dropout of women. So one of our big pushes is to get women back in. So we do it through returnships. So we're working with Bristol is Open at the moment. We've got 2 returners in there. Returnships are very important. So one of the things that I have noticed, so basically what we've grown up as a big network, of supportive network for women. So from school, a lot of men tend to have football clubs or something. They tend to keep their childhood friends, and they have the support network that they have all through their lives. Women, once they have children, they change their networks to suit the age of their children, because that's the parents that they meet. And if you've only got 10% engineers in there, you're very unlikely to meet any female friends at your school gate. So one of the things we're doing is really trying to get people reskilled in. A lot of women have been to me and said, I used to be into tech. And I always say, what did you do? English, art, or history? Normally it is one of those 3. And we just say, well, we can fix you. We can get you into a proper, really good degree. One of the incentives that we've just got DCMS backing for is the Women in Cyber Academy. So that's £10,000 worth of training internally in companies to do cyber training for women only, and especially aimed at returning women. There's an equivalent one in the West Midlands as well around pen testing. So basically, the government have now put their hands in their pockets and said, we're going to support you. The tech skill shortage is there. You're going to have to let the women back in, I'd say.
I was just laughing because you picked my 3 A levels there. Miranda.
Support for women in industry. There was a meme that came around for International Women's Day, which was hire women, promote women, pay women, consult women, cite women. You could be doing all of those things, both men and women. Support for parents, that helps men as well. There are lots of things that you can do to make life a little bit less impossible for parents of young children. Impostor syndrome affects professional women, it affects professional men as well, but particularly women because they've been told all their life, especially if they're in a tech role, that they can't do it. And so when they're promoted, they think, oh no, actually I can't do it. So if you see a woman or a man who is saying, I feel completely out of my depth, I feel that I've been promoted by mistake, reassure them that it's completely normal and that they should take other people's word for their capabilities, not rely on their own judgment.
So I'd really like to highlight something here. It's very important to also, whether when we train a young generation or within the workplace, that we implement the necessary tools actually that could help us understand each other realities in terms of females and male. So we all have different scenarios that we can point at within the workplace. And these are actually part of the problem that is, there is the unconscious bias, and we need to fight that kind of unconscious bias. I would like to highlight that actually some research has shown that virtual reality experiences can have really unique advantage at actually showing you the situation and the experience of female in the workplace from the female point of view and from the male point of view. It's very important that actually we implement these tools, whether in training within organizations or whether in institutions, to help not only raise awareness, but also some of the experiences enable you to have the training in order to understand how you deal with the situation when there is unconscious bias in your scenario. So it's very important that actually implement these tools and leverage them. I believe that technology and the change that is coming with it is actually inevitable, but it's our responsibility and in our decision how we steer the technology and in what kind of roles and knowledge we need to empower by these kind of tools within the society and within our institutions or the workplace. So I'd like to mention that we have a VR headset here that we might move around during the Q&A session. It's about a VR experience in the tech startup from the female point of view and from the male point of view. So you'll get the chance to have a go if you're interested.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned training. Does education have a role to play here, either at higher or further education level? Would you like to start, Siri?
Well, definitely, because we're running a cyber academy. We're finding an awful lot of women going into the career late. So most people have a portfolio career nowadays. It's not a single career. And I've had a portfolio career, and I love it because it gives me a wider understanding of life. So one of the things, we always call it Bob. So Bob is your typical white male. If everything's built by Bob and made by Bob and thought about by Bob, and Bob's only ever talked to his mate Bob, and then you're only going to build things for Bob, and there's more people in the world than Bob. So you really have to consider the fact that actually people moving through different careers bring in transferable skill sets. You know, STEM is now STEAM over in the States because the arts are very inclusive in that. So retraining and reskilling throughout your life is something that I'd really, really suggest that we need to push into. And a lot of the MOOCs, which is the online free training that companies, that people like MIT and Stanford have put out free training on there, they're cheap enough and they're easy enough to get onto. One of the barriers that we're finding is a lot of the boot camps of about £10,000 for 3 months to retrain and reskill. We're getting pushback as well where people are saying, well, they haven't got a computer science degree. We're like, no, but they spent £45,000 on getting their art degree. And now you're telling them they can't come in. Why should they go and spend another £30,000 to turn around and look after them and their family? So I'm really behind the companies. You know, the tech skill shortage is out there. The companies are desperately trying to fulfill these roles. Pay for it, you know, put your money where your mouth is and actually start training up.
Miranda?
Yeah, I think definitely education has a role, but we all have responsibility as well to educate each other and educate ourselves, and either within our personal life or within our job roles. If we don't do anything, it's as if we are actually taking a negative position in the situation. So it's very important that we become proactive more in this kind of area and create these kind of women-led initiatives to support and bring awareness to the whole world, I guess.
Thank you. That leads us quite nicely on to the next question. There's been some research which is highlighted in this article about the gender pay gap at universities, which suggests that there's a gender divide from a very early age in education when it comes to digital skills. This is all about a tendency for men to be earlier adopters compared with women when it comes to technology. It's claimed that this is harming women's promotion prospects and pay progression, as jobs are increasingly reliant on digital skills. That's even in education. Can I start with Miranda in asking whether you recognise this perception from your experience?
It's certainly true that on average, men and boys have more coding experience. That's certainly true. They get to play with a computer. But experience is different from aptitude. This is a very fast-moving field. And what matters is that you have the aptitude and you can learn fast, not how many years' experience that you have. And when I was doing interviewing for positions at Hewlett-Packard, I was much more interested in what a candidate had done in their spare time for fun, what they created, than how many courses they'd passed. I think this is also related to looking at people coming in from unusual routes. You don't look at, have they, yeah.
Okay. Siri, would you like
to... I'd also, right, another thing I'd say is digital skills is not just coding. There's a lot more involved as well, but we may come on to that later.
That was what I was going to.
Yeah, I agree with that, actually. It's very... I think the main problem that we are not offering women as well the same opportunities to bring out the best out of them. I guess you're right. Sometimes I feel that we learn differently as well. We all have different ways of learning, and I think women and men learn and get attracted to particular subjects in different ways. So we probably need to show women more role models and bring to enhance their self-esteem and confidence in this kind of area to fight against the unconscious bias.
I watched a programme, I don't know how many people watched it on BBC, which was No More Boys and Girls, which was a gender neutralising of children at school. And it was really interesting because the boys were given the problem-solving toys. That's why John Lewis has now neutralised, gender decoded their toys, because one of the things that I think really, really stuck out for me was the fact that obviously practice makes perfect. So if you spend your entire life solving problems from a very early age, then obviously you're going to be very confident with that. And you're going to have a confidence probably which is more than your actual skill set. It's just the confidence with familiarity. What was really sad on it was that the boys were given things that weren't vocalising. So actually by the age of 7, the only emotion that they could actually express or describe was anger. They didn't have, whereas girls have dolls, it's all about talking and communication. So I think it's there all the way through. And then what we get is a lack of confidence. So we get a lot of women who go, I'm just not techie enough. And we're like, you got a smartphone, can you switch it on? Right, that's it. That's digital skills for me. That's all I need to know, is that you can switch a smartphone on and answer it. Digital skills, like we were saying, there's lots of it. Basically, we're automating the coding. The coding is not the intelligent bit, the problem solving is.
Okay, thank you. And now we're going to move on to AI. which Anne-Marie this morning in her keynote was talking quite a lot about some of the issues in programming and algorithms and bias. And women are tipped to lose out disproportionately because of AI, as roles in which they are overrepresented in disappear. For example, healthcare and admin. How can we make sure that the technology and education sectors, how can the technology and education sectors make sure that women grasp these opportunities as we approach the fourth industrial revolution? And we'll start with Suhad for that one.
Okay. I'm actually a big fan of makers movement and in its potential in engaging the public and the communities in an informal way to get exposure to emerging technologies and try to solve problems and highlight for them these kind of adaptable STEM skills that they can use and keep reapplying in solving problems within real-world problems within a safe environment. So there is an initiative that's been highlighted in the Sheffield Robotics report that's been published recently. It's called the Fab Lab Initiatives, and it's actually a highly successful collaborative model that encourage women in particular, but generally the young generation and people to in activities that actually upskill them and allow them to work alongside the intelligent machines to upskill these kind of the future workforce. So I believe this is actually can contribute a lot to what we can do. And we can copy these kind of examples and bring them to institutions, for example, universities and colleges. We need more of these kind of maker spaces where we are involved with solving problems, activities, and solving problems with the technology and tinkering and playing around with all kind of these, whatever kind of tools that we can have there to upskill not only students, but also our staff. And it's actually about providing them with a safe environment to experiment, try again, and fail in these kind of spaces.
Sorry?
We were having a talk about this earlier, and I was having a talk with somebody, and we both recently had talks about this. So a lot of the kickback at the moment is that the caring roles, such as the carers, who are very disproportionately underpaid, as is a lot of women's work, the kickback is that we don't think robots should be doing our caring in society. In reality, at the moment, it's a very inefficient service that we have. I've had a lot of women who are just reaching the peak of their industry, and they're not dropping out for childcare issues. So I've got them dropping out in their 30s for that. I've got them dropping out in their 50s to look after the elderly parents because it's very expensive. I think we can probably get past this and use AI to actually, so that actually the caring role becomes much more expensive to pay for a carer to be in, to turn around. And at the moment, I've got them going out and doing the shopping for their parents, making sure, looking after the household and trying to ensure that they're still allowed to stay at home because that's where they want to be. But then they're unable to do the shopping, they're unable to do everything else. We've got the ability to do all of that, and AI, we could link it all together and do the proper smart home, which means that you don't have to drop out, you don't have to go and visit somebody 3 times a week to check they're still alive, because the AI could be doing that for you. You just go down and do the actual caring role, and that caring role should be well paid, because it should be an expensive role for people to actually spend some time with people. I think that's where I'd like to see it going in the caring society.
I only have a little to add to that. I've been talking with a carer recently about what parts of her job she would like automated and what parts of her job she thinks should be left to a human being, and you can separate them. But I would say, why do we think that as soon as technology comes in, women can't do these roles? We all operate, I don't know, washing machines. That's a very techie job. And I imagine operating the AI care robot, the most obvious person to do it will be the person who's already caring. I'd also like to see more men caring, but that's another story.
Thank you. Suhad? Anything to add?
Yeah, I've answered that. Yeah.
Okay.
You started with me, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I've got a follow-up question to that. Sexism in computer systems is often learned from programmers themselves or from source material on the internet. How can we tackle this? And we'll start with Siri.
Basically, it's representative of society. In reality, we need to cut out sexism in society because any AI that we're going to do is going to reflect exactly what we've got in society at the moment. We could actually use it to hopefully bias it away from the sexism, but we'd need to do some algorithmic weighting, really. We need to actually weight it against it. I mean, there's a lot of initiatives now coming in which are actually specifically looking for the biases that are out there. In reality, a lot of things don't look like biases because we're seeing them in everyday society, and I think, you know, this is going to have to be thought about much more cleverly by people who do AI.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So the course that I'm teaching of computer science in society, one of the lectures that I do is precisely on ethical issues in AI and ways of getting rid of bias. We've also just got funding for a new PhD in interactive AI. So if any of you know somebody who can code and do maths and would like a PhD in AI, come and talk with me. And a cross-cutting theme with that will be responsible AI, which will include techniques to get rid of bias in to notice and mitigate bias in your computing. And the idea is that we will train up AI ambassadors who will then go into the industries and teach other people to do this and make sure that the industries of the future have code which is not biased in the same way. And that's one of the ethical issues we're looking at.
So Kevin Kelly, in his book, The Inevitable, said, "We are morphing so fast that our ability to invent new things outpace our rate to civilize them." And I guess it's not only important to talk about how the problem happened, but also how quickly it's spreading all over the world. So it reached to a point where we can't actually minimize even the impact of it on the society. So it's very important to start early before we develop and produce products and new technologies, and develop this kind of regulations and code of ethics that will be very essential in every kind of area. So that's one thing I'd like to highlight, but it's also, there is a responsibility on programmers and coders who usually don't look at things that's from the bigger picture. They usually are more focused on coding and doing their job. So I'd like them to consider a few questions when they start building things. First one: what if what you build has become popular and everyone in the world is using it? That's the first one. Second one: how it will infiltrate our lives. And the third question actually is: who will be left out? So these are three important questions that I feel. They are actually proposed by a researcher in ethics. I'm not sure about her name, but I can tweet that. She has done really interesting research about ethics in AI in particular. So really interesting points of view from her.
If it's not Kate Crawford, I recommend Kate Crawford.
Oh, cool. Yeah, look at that.
There's lots of great work on AI ethics, and for some reason that I don't really understand, it seems to be mainly women working in this.
Ben Byford does as well. He does.
Yeah,
he
Ben
does a lot
Byford,
of
I've been on
podcasts.
his podcast.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, he's great, yeah.
And I've been reading about some academics who've been arguing that AI companies should be regulated like architects.
Yeah.
As architects are regulated to make sure that buildings are safe, so should AI companies to make sure they follow ethical codes and safe practice. Is that something that you can see working? I'll start with Siri.
I think there needs to be more regulation. I think what we're seeing at the moment with social media and Facebook, that's an unregulated thing that's come about, and the actual bad things it causes. I mean, I think at the beginning when they invented the internet, they expected it all to be for good, but as ever, you know, it reflects our society. I think there's an awful lot of regulation. I mean, I come from a safety perspective. I love regulation processes, so I would love to see it. I think it's definitely needed.
I think regulation is likely to be sector-specific rather than general for AI. I also think, I agree with that technology has outstripped the law in several areas, but that is normal for technology because if you regulate too early, that can cause serious problems, and it's a fast-moving field. And one thing that I'm against is regulation of AI professionals. This has been suggested that, you know, everybody who does anything to do with computing has to pass some sort of test. That will be okay if we had a vast oversupply of AI engineers and we had to only pick the best. That is not our problem. And of course, I have an interest in this because I have no qualifications in computer science except being a fellow of the British Computer Science Society and teaching future computer scientists and having lots of papers on computer science. The best way of learning computer science, I think, is doing it. So I'm biased. But yes, I think in certain sectors we're going to have to tighten up regulation. I'd like to see a mixture of regulation, co-regulation, I think might be a better model in some cases. And also making market forces work, looking at different business models in some cases.
I agree, nothing to add actually for that.
Okay. So do we also need to be better at recognising and tackling biases in STEM professions, creating a workforce and also creating a workforce that has those identification skills? Miranda, would you like to start?
Actually, I'd like to hand that over to Siri because we were talking before and she has a great answer.
Okay.
Yeah, the bias there is ridiculous. So I've worked with the NMI over the years, and they spun out to the UKESF. So UKESF is the Electronic Skills Foundation. We don't have enough electronics engineers coming through in the UK to keep us at the fighting front of this. What they offered was a bursary, so they did it with Southampton University and they've extended it to Bristol University. And it's a bursary if you get A-level A grades in maths and physics. So they put a whole load of them through. They went to interview, and the girls actually had slightly more A stars. And what they came back with was they said how many of the women got through into the bursary, and it was 0%. So what they then said to me was, well, they're obviously not interviewing well, or they're not showing themselves off best at the interview. Now, I've come across this before where I sent out it was a woman who'd been out, had FPGA. She'd had 2 years in FPGA. She had a 2-1 from Bristol Uni in electronics. She tried to get back in and they just wouldn't let her back in. It was nothing to do, and when I sent out her CV, they said, well, she's not really selling herself. Now, culturally, we're told not to show off often. We're very risk averse for a start, but we're also told not to show off. So women generally, and you know, people do say that men do tend to BS a little bit more. And I said that to one of the other women, and I said perhaps we ought to teach women to act, you know, to become a little bit more cocky. And they said, no, I like my integrity. So I don't want to turn women into men. I need men and the bias coming out of the other side, out of the interviewer side, to be taken away. I think that's where we need to train people. I don't want to turn women's CVs into men's. I want you to know that you read them slightly differently because women are less likely to oversell themselves. What we actually say is that when you're looking at a job spec or a CV, you normally take the male ones down one and the women up one, and that will normally just about even it up for how much they'll try and oversell themselves.
So machine learning, which is part of AI, the way it works is it's trained to make decisions by searching for patterns in large data sets. And it's actually been used in areas as diverse as recruitment, healthcare, criminal justice, and many more. So if we put blind faith in big data and AI, there's so much, wrong stories that could happen. So it's very important in an organization that we examine our inner workings and that we put diversity as an outcome of a human resource, as a financial performance as well. I believe this actually could contribute to the organization culture, and particularly for organizations that strive to become ahead at innovation. If your data set and if whatever you are doing, you're not diverse in terms of the teams behind the technology, you're actually producing things that aren't particularly targeting the whole world or the whole public, so you're missing out in terms of your marketplace. That's something which is important to highlight for organizations and institutions as well.
Miranda, anything to add?
No, I'm happy with that answer.
Okay. So one more question before we move on to open questions. And briefly, what one piece of advice would you give to young women thinking about a career in tech? And actually, not just young women, any women thinking about a career in tech.
Me? Go for it. Go for it. It's a fabulous career. I mean, don't you agree? It's fantastic. You're working on the things that will create the future. You're working on the most interesting and exciting subjects that there are. Go for it. It's kind of well paid as well.
It's very well paid.
I guess, I'll say the same. Follow, if science and technology is your passion, follow it. It's the same as following any other career dream. But it's also important to have really good self-esteem. And we don't live in a perfect world, so we need to challenge the stereotypes that we have in the society. I'd really encourage, from my experience, women to go and join these kind of women-led initiatives and groups. They're very supportive. You can discuss any kind of issues that you face, or you can find inspirational models that you can actually learn from and talk to. And it's very supportive for women, particularly in tech roles. So I'd really recommend that for anyone.
And I'd say, I mean, I love the industry. I would see it as a problem-solving thing. One of the things that I always say to people, because I hope somebody's going to build this up, is that with the amount of men writing apps, I could probably fly to the moon with an app on my mountain bike. However, if I'm a woman that's breastfeeding and I come to a new city, I don't know where I can go and breastfeed. You know, there's an app out there to be built. We need the women in there to turn around and solve the problems. So I'd say go for it. And networking thing's very, very true. You know, you will get help out there, and go and ask questions and work out what you really want to do within the sector, because it's wide. You've got your 5-minute warning.
So there's a challenge, more apps that women actually need.